Alright, we're not going to take it much longer. An IOP by Harris Wickheiser. My thesis is the use of the recurring motif of monsters throughout Grapes of Wrath and how Steinbeck used this to influence and inform his readers. Overview. He will look at how the monsters are portrayed in the book and what that says of how people at the time felt about them, and how Steinbeck used monsters to send a message to his readers. The types of monsters. There were 4 types of monsters. There were the banks, the trackers, the police, the landowners. The banks were monsters because they forced people off their land and made them leave Oklahoma and their home state. The trackers were depicted as monsters because they destroyed people's homes and tore families apart because they were really undecided whether they should leave their home because there was nothing left for them, or stay because that's where they've been their whole lives. So that's really where they belong. The police, because they treated people harshly and really created a terrible life for people. They made unjust laws and really kept people down. And the landowners were monsters because they paid people insanely unfair wages and created horrible living conditions like the Hoovervilles. Alright, the banks. The reason the banks became monsters is throughout the Depression in the early years of the 1930s, farmers were forced to take out loans because of the bad times. So the first few years when the farmers were first having bad times, they didn't know that it would last for almost a whole decade. They thought it was just 1 or 2 bad seasons, so they took out loans thinking that the next year, the next season, the next harvest, they'd be able to make that money back and pay off the loans. But eventually, after years and years of bad seasons, they were never able to pay them back, and the banks came calling for reimbursement. So they would come and take pretty much everything they had for these loans. They'd auction off all their possessions, their animals, their farming equipment, and they'd ultimately take possession of their home and their land and force families to leave. And because the bank was a system comprised of thousands of people and hundreds of locations, it was really never one person or one thing you could blame. So they were depicted as a monster because you really couldn't kill it because it wasn't one thing, it was the whole system. That's a picture of a 1930s bank with a lot of angry farmers. And these are my bank quotes. They breathe profits. They eat the interest on money. If they don't get it, they die the way you die without air, without sight. That's from chapter 5. We all know that. We all know that, all that. It's not us. It's the bank. A bank isn't like a man, or an owner of 50,000 acres. He isn't like a man either. That's the monster. We're sorry, it's not us. It's the monster. The bank isn't like a man. The bank is something more than men, I tell you. It's the monster. Men made it, but they can't control it. So we're talking about how the bank isn't a man that it's comprised of, but it's a system that's enslaving all these people and forcing them to leave their homes. The trackers. The trackers were part of the bank. They were sent in tractor operators were paid by the bank to go clear these plots of land. And one of the quotes we'll see, they compared the tractor to a tank. They come in, they clear barns, they clear sheds, they clear people's houses, and left families homeless. And they were seen as monsters because they really couldn't die either. Kill the operator of one tractor, not only would one come tomorrow, but the police would also come, and he'd probably be punished pretty severely. And so, when they destroy these people's homes, they'd really be torn whether or not to stay in this place where they had nothing, or to leave in hopes of a better future. So families were torn apart that way, kind of like we see with Muley. He wanted to stay home. The rest of his family knew there was nothing left and went to California. That's a tractor. Tractor quotes. We could love that tractor as we had loved this land when it was ours, but this tractor does 2 things. It turns the land, it turns off the land. There's a little difference between this tractor and a tank. The people were driven, intimidated, hurt by both. They must think about this. So it's saying that they're intimidated because these tractors were huge pieces of equipment that could run over their land and their homes. So they would destroy everything that their family had worked for so long, and really just make them hopeless. All right, the police. The police created unjust laws to keep people from revolting and just to keep people's lives harder. We see a lot, they're kind of like dirty cops. They're always making unfair rules and doing things like when a cop would walk up to your car and say, you've got a taillight out. It's like, no, I don't. And he punches your taillight out. He's like, I see a taillight out. We see that in the book. They crush all hope for a better future by constantly keeping people down. They were reckless and would never take responsibility for actions. We see that when they're in the Hooverville, the policeman accidentally shoots that innocent woman, and they just kind of get in their car and leave. So they don't really care what they do. They just kind of go around making people's lives terrible. They constantly frame, beat, humiliate innocent citizens who threaten the social order. Like we see with Casey. Casey threatened the social order by kind of preaching these ideals, and so that's why they killed him, because he was threatening what they were trying to protect. That's a normal policeman of the time. And the police quotes, tire salesman on Highway 66. That's what you think. Ever hear of the Border Patrol on the California line? Police from Los Angeles. Stop you bastards, turn you back. It says if you can't buy no real estate, they don't want you. It says got a driver's license? Let's see it. Tore it up. It says you can't come in with a driver's license. So this is what we see with the taillight. He says he can't come in with a driver's license. He shows him his driver's license and he rips it up. So they really did whatever they could to try and keep these Okies, these foreign people, from coming into the state. Alright, the landowners. Landowners pay people next to nothing so they can make a huge profit. They had horrible living conditions, which were inhumane and disgusting, to avoid housing and plumbing costs. And since people were so desperate for work, when the demand for work goes down or up, then more and more people are trying to get jobs, and they pay less and less. And so they pay insanely low profits, and so many people are trying to come get jobs that they could really make a huge profit off it. They had a gigantic workforce. They were paying next to nothing to get a huge profit. And oftentimes, this wasn't in the book, but I found this, they'd oftentimes have stores on their land that would charge insane prices for normal goods and services. And so the money they paid the workers would go right back into their pockets. And I kind of compared this a bit to like a movie theater, how movie theaters charge insane prices for Cokes and popcorn and stuff, but they won't let you take anything else in. So you're kind of forced to pay these prices for things that you can't really avoid spending. That's your typical entrepreneur time. Landowner quotes. The owners of the land came onto the land, or more often a spokesperson of the owners came. They came in closed cars, and they felt the dry earth with their fingers. Sometimes they drove big earth augers into the ground for soil tests. The tenants, from their sun-beaten dooryards, watched uneasily when the closed cars drove across the fields. Some of the owner men were kind because they hated what they had to do. Some of them were angry because they hated what they had to do, because they hated to be cruel. Some of them were cold because a long time ago they found out that one could not be an owner unless one was cold. So it talks about how a lot of the owners and the men paid by the owners to go talk to the people who owned the land didn't like what they had to do. It's kind of like with the tractor operators that we see in one of the earlier chapters in the books. He says he didn't like what he had to do, but he had to do it because he had to feed his family too. And that's what these are saying. Some of these men hated what they had to do, but they had to feed their family just like any other person. So they were kind of trapped into what they were having to do with really no other alternative. Because if they didn't do it, then they couldn't feed their own families, but they hated having to force these people to leave. Steinbeck's purpose for the monsters. Steinbeck wrote Grapes of Wrath to inform the nation and give a voice to the people of the Midwest, the victims of the Depression. The Grapes of Wrath was kind of like the Uncle Tom's Cabin of the Great Depression. It kind of just put the Depression in the face of the nation and just made people really decide about what should be done. So a lot of people who kind of ignored it, pushed off to the side, or didn't even really know about it, it really just informed the whole nation and just put it in people's faces. He used monsters to show how hard these people's lives were, to kind of illustrate to them the challenges these people faced, and he kind of did it to try and evoke a response from the people, to try and use it as a vessel to evoke anger and emotion to help stop this cruel mistreatment.